Everyone, my name is Preston and I am a front-end engineer. I've been working with front-end technologies for the last 2 to 3 years, and today I'll be showing you how to tackle this front-end mentor challenge, and that is the contact form challenge. I'll also link this challenge down in the description below. And before we get started, just to mention, if you're new to this channel and you'd like to get up-to-date content, and then consider subscribing and liking this video such that you don't get to miss out on any further uploads, right? So once you click on the link that is down in the description below, it's going to take you to this page, right? So the first thing is that you need to download these starter files. So going to step 2 and then click on download starter files, and then it will give you a zip file. So you'll have to extract it somewhere, maybe in the desktop or the downloads folder. Then once you're done, you're now ready to start. So once you open it, it's going to give you some contents over there, right? And then you'll have this style guide, and then yeah, it's going to look like something like this, right? So the style.css, I think it's not there, so I'll just maybe delete mine to just resemble what is supposed to be. Yeah, so this is how it's going to be. So you're going to see some contents in the body section, so you can just remove them or maybe comment them out. And yeah, so the first step is to launch the live server, and this will allow you to see the changes in real time whenever you make those changes without having to refresh, right? So it will help you a lot. So the first step is we need to structure our contents, right? We need to create divs, we need to use elements, because in HTML we have to use the different tags for different elements, right? So the first step is to create the first div, and then we're going to name it contact form. So we're going to have an h1, which is contact us. So keep in mind that the classes that you're using, the class names don't really matter. What matters is if it's maybe readable, or maybe it's something that you can stick to a convention. So speaking of conventions, we have different CSS conventions, that it's something that I can cover in future videos. So be sure to subscribe and maybe comment down below in the comments what conventions maybe you'd like to learn, and something that I can just focus on later on. So inside of the contact form, we're going to have the h1, and after the h1 we're now going to create a form. So what is a form? So a form is basically anything that allows the input from the user, and then it has a button to handle to perform a certain activity or a certain action once the user fills the form. Okay, so once the user gives the input, an action is going to happen, and that's what we call a form in HTML. So a form exists in many forms. That's not a pun. I mean, like in places where we get to see forms is number one in the search bars. When you go to YouTube, most of the time you have to you can enter the text, and then you can search for specific videos. So that is an instance where we use forms. Another instance is for instance, this challenge. Now this is a contact form challenge, so you'll have to fill in your first name, your last name, your email, your address, and maybe the message, and then you'll have to click a button, and this button will now perform a certain activity, right? So that's where we use forms. So we're going to have this form. So for now you can remove the action, and then inside of this form you're going to have a form row, right? So I deal with the class name form row. Again, keep in mind that the way you're going to name these classes don't really matter. Doesn't really matter actually, because this is what you're going to refer when we'll be writing our CSS. Okay, yeah, so instead of this div, we're going to have form group, and instead of the form group, we'll now have a label for first name. So this label is what is going to appear to tell the user that this input field is for this information. So we're going to call it first name, and we're going to give it a class of required, right? Because this, we're going to use this class to manipulate, maybe style this label, right? After this, we're going to have the input, and the type is going to be text. Of course, you can give it an ID of first name, and also the name attribute, which is first name. So the same as the label, the for value, right? So this is the same as the ID and the name, right? And then the next thing is to set an attribute of required, and this will prevent the user from submitting it. If the user hasn't filled the first name, the form is not going to be submitted. So it's a method to achieve HTML form validation without having to write JavaScript. So yeah, it's one of the concepts that you can just get to use from earlier on. So for this div, we're going to have another div, right? So the other div is going to be form group as well. Form group. And inside of this form group, we are going to have a label as well. So the label is going to be the last name. So instead of repeating this, you can just copy and paste it here like that, and then now change this into last name, and also copy it to this and this, and then change this to last name, right? As you can see on the left, we already have some two fields, first and last name. Yeah, and they are actually the same like that. So the next step is after this div, because you're still in the after this form row, you're going to have another div, form group, and then it's going to also have a label for email, and it's going to be class required. I'm going to call it email address, and after this label, we're going to have an input of type email, right? And we're going to give it an ID of email, and then the name is going to be also the same as the ID, which is email. And after this div, another form group, we're going to call it a label. Give it a class first. The class is going to be required. Query type, right? And then inside of this, we're going to have radio group, right? Radio group. So that's amazing. Instead of this, we're going to have a label. So this label is going to be having a class again. Call it radio. Call it radio option, and then we have another input inside. Type radio, right? Name is going to be query type, and value is going to be general, and I'm going to make it required such that you cannot fill the form if you haven't really typed anything, right? So it's going to be general inquiry, and then you're going to have a similar field, but this time it's going to be another one. So we can just copy this here, but then change this to support request, like that, and then the value is going to also change. And after this, two divs, then form group, and then we're going to have a label. We can say message class. We're going to keep it as required. So we're using required for the class. We're going to manipulate the content using the class, using the CSS, and you'll refer to this class and then manipulate this message and add the asterisks, the same way we see it on the design. So it's something that we want to do, but using CSS, right? Amazing. So instead of having the input here, because the input is kind of small, we're going to use another element by the name text area. So text area, and then we're going to give it an ID of message and the name of message as well, and then it's going to be required, so the user has to fill this before submitting, right? And then after this div, we're going to have a checkbox group, and then we put the input type of checkbox. ID is consent, name is consent as well, and required, right? So label is going to be consent, class is required, and then you're going to have a text: I consent to be contacted by the team, right? So I think that's the text in the design. And then after this div, I think you can just have a button, right? Because it's the only thing that is remaining, so no need to put it inside of a div because it's the only element. So type is going to be submit, and then it's going to have a name of submit. So up to that point, you're done with our HTML. The next step is to move into CSS. To use CSS, you'll have to introduce this line, the link rel style sheet href styles.css, and then you can click Control and then left click, and then it will prompt you to create that file, right? So you'll have to create a file here by the name style.css, which you have done. And now we are going to move into the styling part. So remember, with CSS we mentioned that it's cascading, number one. So cascading means you start with the general styles, and then we're going to dive into the very, very specific styles. And the good thing is that we assigned class names, so we're going to use class names to style our HTML elements, right? Great. So we're going to reset most of the properties. As you see, we already have some padding and some margin, which is something that can really interfere with our specific values. So normally, to reset these CSS properties that sometimes are defaulted to some specific values, we'll say margin 0, and then padding you can set as 0, and then globally we want to also define some fonts. So we can use sans serif, but for this guide they told us to use Google Fonts. So I'll also do a separate video on how you can use external fonts, but at this point I want to make this accessible because I want it to still work if you're following along, maybe offline, you downloaded this video. Yeah, so that's one thing that I want to consider. So we'll just use sans serif for this because they look similar, number one, and number two, it can work offline, right? And the next thing we need to reset is the box sizing. We're going to set it to border box, and this will reset the width and the height properties, right? So some elements by default have some width, some pixels as default, so just making the default widths and the heights to be 0. Okay, so that's what this property is going to do. After this, we're going to move into body is going to have the background color, of course. So say background color, and then we'll go with the lighter green from the style guide, like that. Copy and paste the property, and then display is going to be flex, and then we'll have to center this. So justify content, center, align items, center as well, and then a minimum height of 100 viewport of the height. So this is how you can center a div, right? Most of the time it's display flex, justify content, center, and align item, center, and then a minimum height, or sometimes you can just do height. Okay, but minimum height is now in all the screens, it's just going to check this by default, right? Great. And then we're going to have a padding of 20 pixels all around, just leave some space outside, and with that we're done with the body. And then the next thing you need to move into the contact form. So our contact form looks like this. It has everything, all of our elements. It's a wrapper, it's a container for all of our elements. So the contact form is going to have the following styles. You're going to make it a background color of kind of white, so the white that we've been provided is in this style guide, so we'll just use that. Border radius to smoothen the corners, it's going to be 16 pixels. Padding you can set 40 pixels as well, and then we can have I think something like width for 100% is actually great. Max width is going to be I think 650 px to prevent this white space, right? To prevent it from overstretching on larger screens, right? So give it a max width. So max width actually helps us to restrict the maximum width that it can span. And the next thing we're going to have is box shadow 04 px. You can have 6 pixels. You can have something like that looks kind of grayish, so you can just put this value like that. And as you can see, we are almost getting it closer to our design. So the next step is to get into the very specific contents of our contact form. So we're going to go into the H1, and then color is going to be the same white that not white, but the darker gray 900 value from the style guide. I'm going to paste it there. Font size we can use 28 pixels, and then margin bottom I think we can use 24 pixels for that. And then for the font weight we can use 700 because I think that is what that's what they specified in the style guide. For the bold the bold variations of our fonts. So we're going to get into the form group. So the form group looks like this. You have this instance, we also have this, we also have most of the divs with the same class name. So we're going to just use the styles. So that's why I mentioned that you can just use any names, but so long as it gives you a description of maybe what it's about. So I can also do maybe some content about the CSS naming conventions if there's anyone who would like to learn more about that. So margin bottom is going to be 20 pixels for the form group, and yeah, you can see now we have some spacing. Things are not compacted as they were, because in each and every div we have that. So just for visualization, there's this extension called pesticide. I'll also link it down in the description below. It helps you to kind of look at uh, the borders kind of your elements, so that you can debug your CSS much easily in case there's any problem that you're facing, right? So it's known as pesticide. I'll also link it. It's very, very helpful when it comes to fixing some of the CSS issues, and it's very, very nice, especially if you're using it to learn. So we're now going to move into the form row. So form row, we can have a display of flex, then gap is going to be 20 pixels, and then some spacing below we can have 20 pixels for that. Yeah, and you can see it's kind of spacing things out nicely. The next thing you need to move into is inside of the labels. You're going to have a display block so that they are aligned vertically the way you want. And the next thing is to put margin bottom. I think 8 pixels can work. So color, we're going to use the dark gray variant, this one for the text color, and I think font size can be 16 pixels. Yeah, and we're now coming to the required class. Remember, in the design you have some asterisks, so instead of having to put the asterisks here, maybe put it here and all that, we can use CSS to modify the contents, and this means that after the element, the contents of that element, we're going to introduce a content with this asterisk, right? So as you can see, you can just use the class name to modify the contents, as simple as that. So for the query type, I think I misspelled this one, is required, and that's going to fix that. And then we're going to move into the color. So the color is going to be not very dark, so we're going to pick the medium variant for that. I'm going to replace that with this, just like that, and yeah, it looks good. The next step is to now move into the input. So outside of this input, the ones that have the attribute as that text, and also the input which has the attribute of type as, I think, email. Yeah, email. And also the text area, all of those are going to have width of 100%, right? So let me just see. Yeah, padding is also going to be 12 pixels, and then I think you can have a border 1px solid, and we're going to give it some medium gray. this color, gray 500. And then I'm almost forgetting something, but I think so far we're good. We're going to add a border radius to smoothen the edge, the corners. 8 pixels, I think can work. Yeah. And our font size maybe 16 pixels. Yeah, makes things better. So we are almost there. So I think we're now trying to get the design really well. So text area resize is going to be vertical, and this is going to allow us to resize this only in the vertical direction. Okay, and then minimum height is going to be 120 pixels, so that will come like it's already resized to some extent, and that's the minimum the height that you can cover. But without this property, you realize that you can even compact it past the condition that is stated. So we're going to have minimum height 120, and then we'll move into the radio group. So radio group will be display, you can use flex, and then align items that can be center, and then padding 12 px, and then border we can have 1 px solid, and then like that. I think you can have a gap here, or still let's just leave it like that for now. Border radius is going to be 8 pixels to smoothen the corners, and then cursor pointer, so that when I hover my mouse I'm going to have that hand over there. So this is a radio group. I think we made a mistake. We have the radio group and we have the radio option. So after display flex, you're going to have flex direction of column first. Yeah, gap is going to be 12 pixels, and then width we can just span the entire width. For the radio option, we're going to have display flex, and then align items center, and then padding you can have 12 pigs. Can also have border, can have that, and then border radius 8 pixels. Cursor is now going to be pointer. Yeah, I think we are now closer to getting the design that we want. So we now have to move into the radio option. So radio, I think we are here, so we need to move into this radio radio option, right? Radio option, and inside it's the input that has the attribute of type equal to radio. That is what we're going to style. So I'll put a margin right, I think can work. Margin right 10 pixels. So then you can have the width and the height at I think 18 pixels. So height and the width to be 18, and then the accent color is going to be I think dark the gray 500 still works. Yeah, that's okay. And we can now move to the checkbox. So you can see we are almost done. So we're now cascading, we started with the general styles and then we're now diving into the very specific ones. So we'll go get into the checkbox group. Checkbox group input. We're going to make it type checkbox. Checkbox. So we're going to target this style and then we're going to move into this checkbox that is within this container with that style, right? That's why we are naming it like that. So we're going to put a margin right of I think 10 pixels, still consistent, and then margin top of 2 pixels. Width and the height is still going to be 18 pixels, so also copy this height here, and then you can still have the same just a minute. Yeah, we're going to use the same style. So I think here we forgot the checkbox group alone, so you can target that as a standalone, then say display flex, then align items flex start, and then I'll also have margin top of 20 pixels and margin 30 pixels. I think that's fair enough. And then we are now into the button, right? So background color is going to be green, but not very green, right? And then color is going to be white, but remember we are using this shade or this variant of white, so that's what we're going to use for text color. And then border, there's going to be none of that, and a bore radius is going to be 8 px, and then you can have some padding to make it kind of bigger because it's a bit tiny, yeah, like that. Then width is going to be 100% of that container, yeah. So you can see it's now full width, and then font size is going to be 16 pixels, and then I think you can also add some font weight of 400. Remember there's 400 and 700, so that's the two variants of the weights. So if it's not bold it's 400, but if you're bolding it much it's 700, and that's how we make it look. And then cursor, we can say pointer, such that when I hover on that the cursor is going to change into the pointer. Then transition, I think you can say background color 0.2 seconds, right? Amazing. So on hover button, so whenever we hover this button, what we're going to have is the background color is going to be dark, right? Background color is now going to be it's going to be lighter, right? So this is what we're going to have at the background color. But I think it's still kind of off. So what you're going to do is you're going to make it gray dark, right? But feel free, you can use maybe some color that you feel, yeah, I think this one blends in nicely. And then after that we're done with the desktop version. So I think we need to fix the first name and the last name part. So for the form row, we can say width 100%. Yeah, or if that's not working, I think form group. Yeah, so you can try to fix this, because I think um yeah, so it's now fixed for the desktop version. So we now need to make this responsive for mobile, so we can say responsive styles, and then we're going to pop in some styles for responsiveness. Of course, you're going to use the media query, so we'll say uh, at media into parentheses, I'm going to say max width. So for any device below 768 pixels, okay, we're going to have these styles. So the contact form is going to be having a padding of 30 pixels, and then another style is form row, going to be flex direction is going to be column, right? And then you can say gap 20 pixels, and then margin bottom is going to be 0, right? So you're not going to have any margin bottom for that. And also we'll have to I think increase or reduce the font size for the H1. So font size is going to be 24 pixels. So again, you can still feel free to just play around with any of those. And yeah, that's how we create our amazing contact us challenge for our front-end mentor challenge, right? So thank you so much for watching. I know it's been a bit technical, especially if it's for the first time you're doing this challenge and you kind of thought it's not possible. But yeah, feel free to watch this again and again if you're working on this challenge. And also I'd like to mention about maybe some of the resources that you can use. So Frontend Mentor is one of the best places that you can learn, but you can still use other platforms like Scrimba to practice on your front-end challenges. So up to that point, I'd like to thank you so much for staying through to the end. So thank you so much for watching, and consider sharing this video, like and subscribe for more of such content. So